Okay, so we're moving on here, and we're getting to the point that we're going to start talking about maybe some more interesting and important and exciting things. So chapter 5 is about efficiency and equity. This is something economists talk about a lot, but with less certainty maybe than we would like. No? All right, so we're talking about two things. Primarily, we're talking about allocation of resources. Primarily, we're talking about how resources get split up. So there's only so much labor in the country. There's only so much land. There's only so much capital. Is that land, labor, and capital going to get used to build a giant new hotel in Las Vegas? Is it going to get used to build a car factory in Iowa? Where are the resources going to go? Again, resources are finite. We're limited. We have to make choices. How do we allocate those resources across all the different things that they could be used for? Okay. Tied to that is something that we didn't write down here, which is what we call the distribution of income. So those resources are going to generate money. Hopefully, they're going to create a profit for the businesses that employ them. Workers are going to get paid. Land is going to get paid. Capital is going to get paid. How do we decide who gets how much? Okay? So allocation of resources. Within this are two important things to consider. The first of these is efficiency. And again, we've talked about efficiency before. Efficiency is getting the most output for our inputs. How do we achieve the highest level of production? If we have 10 workers in a company, how do we know that we're getting the maximum possible effort out of those 10 workers? That's efficiency. Efficiency can be determined if we are at the most efficient point. We know that we can't make anyone better off without making someone else worse off. So efficiency is getting the most output per unit of input. And how do we know when we've achieved efficiency? We can't make anyone better off without making another person worse off. And that last thing again is called Pareto optimality, right? If we're at this Pareto optimality that I can't make you better off without making someone else worse off, we are at maximum efficiency. Now, we know from our prior discussion there's very little chance we're actually at that point, but ignoring that, that's our goal. A subtext to all this, though, is this question of equity. If we reach that point of maximum efficiency, but when we do it, there's 10 million really, really rich people in America and 290 million really poor people in America. Is that what we should have done? Is that equitable? Is it right that these few people get everything and the bulk of people get nothing to achieve that efficiency? Or are we better off if we have a little less efficiency and a little more equity? Are those two things opposites? And some economists argue kind of that they are, that if you want to achieve maximum efficiency, you're going to have a lot of inequity. Other economists disagree, but there's a discussion about this, and this is where we are. Does the little fish get the big bowl and the big fish get the little bowl? Okay, so how do we go about allocating resources? Well, there's two ways that we allocate most of the resources that we use in our society, right? The United States is a mixed capitalism. That means we primarily allocate through markets and prices. We know that there used to be, still are some ways, but there used to be a lot more retail stores. The people went out and they shopped and they went to the mall and they went to the clothing stores at the mall, and they went to the department stores at the mall, and people hung out and shopped at the mall. And we know that the number of malls in America has gone way down. The number of department stores in America keeps going down. Clothing companies that sell clothes in the mall are going bankrupt at a regular basis here. And we're going more and more to the place where we're buying things online. Okay? What happens? Well, the market sends signals. The market sends signals to companies that sell clothes in the mall that their prices are too high, that they can't sell, that they're at a disequilibrium and they have to keep lowering their prices. Well, at some point you keep lowering your prices to compete with the online retailer, you're going to lose money. The online retailer doesn't have to pay the high rent in the mall, doesn't have to keep their store open if nobody's coming in, doesn't have to do a lot of things that the store in the mall has to do. So the market, through prices, sends signals to these companies. As Starbucks blooms, the market sends messages to McDonald's, and McDonald's responds by offering some of the things that Starbucks offers. Okay? Companies that respond to what's going on in the market succeed. So Best Buy is still around. There used to be a half a dozen other companies that are kind of Best Buy places, and they're all gone. But Best Buy survived, and they survived by changing what's in their store and changing how they operate. You used to walk into Best Buy, and it would be full of CDs and DVDs and a lot of electronic stuff that is in there still, but there's like an aisle of it. What do they do? Well, appliances. You don't want somebody dropping a dryer off, a clothes dryer in front of your apartment, right? You don't want to order it on Amazon and have it show up and some guy drop it off in a box in front of your house and you have to get it in the house. And there are things that you want installed and hooked up, and so now that's a big part of Best Buy's business, these things that you don't want to do yourself. Yes? And then there's a huge section of telephones in Best Buy. Huge section. The first thing you walk in at any Best Buy store now, you see all these telephones, and they're a big telephone provider. Then they have a big computer section, video games, televisions, and then there's all these other things, but there's little tiny sections of all those other things. Okay? They responded to what the marketplace told them to do. Competitors who didn't do that fail. Resources moved to Amazon because consumers like the fact that it's low price, it's quick, they don't have to leave the house, there's all these advantages. Resources move that way. Amazon and its competitors, they move away from other things. So all those little boutique clothing stores in the mall are in trouble because people don't want to just go to the mall and hang out and shop for clothes anymore, apparently. Okay? So in our system, markets and prices drive how resources are used. General Motors, Ford, basically getting out of the car business. They're going to be truck and SUV manufacturers with only a few boutique cars in their inventory just for show. But all of the mid-size family car business, that's going to be Honda and Toyota and Nissan, those kind of companies. And the American car companies are out of that business. The market told them. Nobody had to send them a letter and say, get out of this business. Their profits, their prices, the market told them what to do. Okay? Kind of the opposite of this, but a big part of what we do is what's called command. Command means the government says. Okay? So because of global warming, the Obama administration and the Bush administration too said to the car companies, you need to make cars that have better gas mileage. So we issued a command essentially that says resources need to go to vehicles that get better gas mileage. Trump administration comes in, they say, nope, you can do whatever you want. The car makers haven't really changed, it seems, what they're doing, but consumers, right, can go, if they all want to buy gas guzzlers now, they can. Okay? The government often tells us how we're going to allocate resources. They tell us how we're going to allocate resources in the healthcare market. Right? The government controls Medicare. It's a big chunk of the healthcare market. They can decide how those resources get allocated. They have the whole Veterans Administration healthcare system. They can decide how those resources get allocated. And they don't have to respond to what the market tells them and what prices are. They can do it the way they, as individuals, as people, decide they want to do it with. Okay? They don't have to respond to those market forces. All right, a couple other ways we allocate resources. One is majority rule. There's people running for office these days who think that college education should be free, and we've already talked about the fact that economists don't think anything is ever free, but that's their deal, free college education. Well, if we vote those people into office, there'll be free college education. If we don't vote those people into the office, then there won't be. So the voters, through the majority rule of the voting booth, can make some decisions about what gets produced and what doesn't get produced and where resources go. Okay? Some resources, not very many, but some resources get allocated by contest, and a basketball game is a contest where the outcome gets decided by a fight between the parties. Sometimes in business we think about that occurring, okay, where there are two satellite companies and they fight with each other and one of them wins and one of them loses. All right? It's part of the whole market deal, but it's interesting to think sometimes about the fact that the market may be sending signals, but these two companies or three companies are fighting each other as if they were playing chess or playing some other game with each other. Some resources are allocated first come, first served. So you get to school, the parking spaces are allocated first come, first served, and you might not be happy about that. Okay? If you want a flu shot, we usually run out of flu shots at some point during the year. The people who go in first are sure to get one. The people who go in last might not get one. So there are some resources that happen on a first come, first served basis. We don't allocate many resources on lotteries, but lotteries have a useful place. And again, even though I put the Mega Millions thing up there, I'm really not talking about that kind of a lottery. One person in America gets rich every year by winning the lottery, and then usually they blow all that money anyhow and end up not rich. But a lottery system is useful when you have a lot of people who want something and no meaningful way to choose between them, right? And I give you an example, and it's a television show example that I don't know if you ever watched Battlestar Galactica, but the evil Cylons nuke the planets where the humans live on. So the humans who want to live have to leave, but there aren't enough ships to take those humans off. How do they decide who gets to live? Well, basically, a lot of these places, they have a ship and it's got 8 seats on it. There's 60 people standing there who want on this ship, and so they give each person a number, and then they pull 8 numbers out of the hat, and that's who gets to go on the ship and be saved. So sometimes there's no way to decide. If you think about the Titanic when it was sinking, they have 1,000 seats on the lifeboats for 2,000 people on the boat. First, they put the women and children on the lifeboats because that's the way they did things. And then they should have put some men on the lifeboats and filled them up. But a lot of the lifeboats, because they couldn't decide who it was who belonged on the boat next, they just sent those lifeboats off. And so you had lifeboats that would hold 70 people, and they sailed away from the Titanic with 30 people on them, when they could have saved 40 more people. What they should have done, obviously, the simplest way to do it would be some kind of lottery where you've got 40 seats, everybody's standing here, we give you all a number and pick, right? If there's no way that makes sense to decide who gets saved, then lottery is a good way to do that, right? So resources can be allocated that way when we can't figure out another way to do it. There's some bad ways that resources get allocated. One is personal characteristics. I like you, and therefore, I give you something. And, this happens in the real world all the time. If you eat at a restaurant a lot and the people there like you, all of a sudden you might get a free dessert every now and then, or a little extra stuff. And that's not a big deal, but personal characteristics as a method to allocate resources is usually a bad way. And I put this picture up here not to pick on anybody, but this is just one of the more obvious things about how personal characteristics sometimes decide. Congress has interns. Congress has college students who spend a summer or a semester working in the Capitol, learning the inner workings of how the U.S. government works. The left side of this picture are the Republicans from a couple years ago, and the right side of this picture are the Democratic interns. The Republican interns on the left, the Democratic interns on the right. Do you think personal characteristics of the applicants had an effect on who ended up being an intern for which party? Okay, that says something maybe not so good about our political parties, that this is the personal characteristics obviously tell us something about who ends up where. Okay, we don't want people to decide how resources get allocated because I like you and I don't like you, or I like the. That's not the American way. And then sometimes resources get allocated by force, right? Rebels in a country go kill a bunch of people and take over the diamond mines. That's a heck of a bad way to allocate resources, right? World War II in large part was, in the Pacific, was in large part about people wanting to get their hands on oil and tin and aluminum and iron that didn't exist in their own country, and so they tried to use force to reallocate the resources. And generally, we like the force, but we don't like to use force to allocate resources.